A few months ago, I made a video all about how award shows, specifically theatre award shows, can make their categories more inclusive. I was mainly making this video because of the upcoming openings of shows featuring a lot of trans performers. But I knew when I made that video that I was going to have to talk about this again at some point. And this week we've seen some controversy come up over the Tony Awards. As a trans content creator here on YouTube with a massive focus on theatre, I felt like it was important that I talk about this. It's a hard one to talk about because it's frustrating and it's really deeply upsetting, but it would be wrong not to talk about it. Typically on this channel, I like to uplift. I like to show my passion for theatre and talk about it through my positivity for it. But on this channel, I seek to uplift the trans voice, uplift the trans perspective on these conversations that we are so often left out of. So let's talk about what happened. The Tony Awards have an eligibility committee where they will determine who is eligible in which awards for that season. This is for a multitude of reasons. There may be shows that are a little bit of a grey area that don't quite fit into the categories, and this committee takes that and tries to fit them in. Take the example of something like Six, which is in this upcoming season. Six is a musical that has a slightly different casting style. Instead of having a lead and then supporting cast members and ensemble, these 6 roles are all equally main roles. So who do you nominate? Who do you push forward? Who's your leading roles? Are there any leading roles? Are there your supporting? The Eligibility Council makes the decisions on that. The problem with this, however, comes from the fact that not always will these actors or will these productions fit neatly into these categories. And there we can talk about the musical And Juliet. And Juliet has recently transferred from the West End to Broadway. And with this, it has given Broadway a non-binary character in the role of May, played on Broadway by Justin David Sullivan. This is big for multiple reasons, mainly because of the fact that Broadway shows haven't had much but non-binary representation, especially roles that are specifically non-binary. However, in this round of eligibility determinations, Justin David Sullivan was asked to choose, as a non-binary performer, whether they will be nominated in the male or the female categories. With this, Sullivan decided to bow out of nominations, meaning that they are not eligible for any of the awards. The Playbill article that I'm using for this video gives this quote from Sullivan, which reads as such: "I was told that I had to choose the category in which I felt comfortable, and in that process I struggled a lot. There is nothing more that I want to empower the non-binary people to show that it is possible to be non-binary on Broadway, play a non-binary character on Broadway, and be nominated and possibly, potentially awarded. I felt like I couldn't choose. I didn't feel right being in either category because it didn't resonate with me. I decided the only thing that felt right to me would be to abstain from nomination consideration, so I will not be considered for a Tony nomination." The Playbill article here goes on to state that, according to New York Times, this is not the first time that a non-binary performer has had to bow out of nominations because they didn't want to be awarded in a male or female category. And actually, the example they give was last year's production of Macbeth. And although they didn't make this public, Asia Kate Dillon, according to the New York Times, bowed out from nominations. So 2 seasons in a row, the Tony Awards have essentially excluded non-binary people, making them feel uncomfortable and making them have to choose between two categories that they don't fit into. The Tony Awards have made a statement on this, and it reads as such: "We recognise that the current acting categories are not fully inclusive, and we are currently in discussion about how best to adjust them to address this. Unfortunately, we are still in process on this, and our rules do not allow us to make changes once a season has begun. We are working thoughtfully to ensure that no member of our community feels excluded on basis of gender identity in future seasons." Further on, Sullivan states that, "I hope this is a wake-up call, not only to the Tonys, but for every award show, to celebrate everyone and to make sure they're being inclusive. Things are shifting. There are so many genderqueer and gender-expansive artists in our community, and they bring so much to the table, so it hurts, and it was a really hard decision to make. As a young theatre kid, that's all you dream about. I always felt like people just didn't know where to put me, what to do with me, so it was really a shame to get to this point in my career where I'm breaking ceilings and doing things I have always dreamed about, and to still feel like people don't know where to put me. I hope that this inspires a conversation to be had, an important one, that needs to happen to make sure that moving forward there is more inclusivity in nomination categories." I have no other words for this situation than this sucks. This really sucks. Non-gendered categories are not a new thing. We are seeing more and more award shows ditch gendered categories. To still see non-binary people have to be excluded from receiving nominations, it's not right. And if what that article states is correct, that this is the second year in a row that it's happened, this should not be the wake-up call. The first person who felt like they had to withdraw from nominations should have been the wake-up call. The fact that they are only considering this now because an actor had to speak up about it is deeply disrespectful. And what's more, this is one of the first examples of a non-binary role on Broadway. This is important to a lot of people. This is important to people like me, younger trans people who will look at this situation and see how the industry excludes you. And what's more, it's more upsetting that, as I stated in my last video on this, performance is the only thing that is separated by gender. Directing is not separated by gender. Set design is not separated by gender. Book, score, all of these categories mix gender together. And once more, it's just a sad excuse as well. Was there nothing else that you could do? If you were in process of changing the categories for future seasons, why couldn't you do a one-off category to celebrate this performer? To still be able to recognise them this year, despite you only putting these things into place in future seasons. What's more upsetting is the argument of, well, there are not enough non-binary people to make a separate category, doesn't even apply here. The last Tony Awards that happened, the 2020, 2021, it was a weird, COVID basically happened. Within that season, we had a Best Leading Actor category that had one nomination for one performer, Aaron Tveit. Could you not make it this year because of the exclusion of the categories, make this one category as a one-off thing? There are a lot of different things that the Tony Awards could have done as a one-off, we recognise that this is a problem, we recognise that this year this is going to affect things, we can't change it this year, however, here's an olive branch, here's a thing, and we promise that next year we're going to make it more inclusive. Because at the end of the day, you have excluded this actor. The way that the awards show has been set up has excluded this actor. Completely and utterly. And the question is, and the thing that really upsets me, is that if they hadn't have spoken out about this, would you even be going through the process right now of changing these up? This actor has had to sacrifice something that is a given to every single other performer on Broadway because of who they are and because of the rules of the Tony Awards. Constantly, non-binary people are just expected to choose where they feel more comfortable. And for years, trans people, not just non-binary people, trans people are expected to put themselves into a box where they don't belong. There's a lot of trauma that comes with that. For years, I felt like I didn't belong. For so long, I was forcing myself into a role and a box that was completely and utterly wrong for me. And to see a performer be told to have to put themselves back into these boxes where they don't fit is honestly insulting. And what's more, with these changes to the categories, are you consulting non-binary people? Are you consulting trans people? In this point in time, we are seeing debates about trans people where we are being completely and utterly excluded. This is happening on a political scene with our literal identity and our rights being stripped away in many places, like here in the UK, like in the US. And then to see the exact same thing happen in our industry, I cannot express how deeply it hurts. There are solutions to this. I've talked about this. I've made videos about this. So many people have made videos about this and talked about this. This is not a new conversation. Other award shows have changed their categories. Let's do examples. Brit Awards have changed their categories. This Playbill article mentions an American example of the Lucille Lortel Awards, which apparently honours off-Broadway productions, and they've removed gender from their categories. The Outer Critics Circle Awards as well, which recognises Broadway and off-Broadway productions, have also changed their categories to make them genderless, and they will be coming into play this year. Over here in the UK, we have the What's on Stage Awards, which last year had a temporary solution and has now made it so that this year the categories are completely genderless. It doesn't really make sense that this is the only category split by gender. A male performer, a female performer, or a non-binary performer are all doing the same job. They are all doing the same job, and there are so many different things that you can split this on. You can split it on genre, have one about a comedic performance, one about a dramatic performance. You can have it so that you have multiple winners in each category, so you're not limiting the number of performances that win. So that at the end of the day, you're still awarding the same amount of people. There are so many valid and different solutions to this, and if you want to see my breakdown of all of these, I do implore you to go watch that video. That video tackles all of my opinions on this, all the different arguments pro and against. I know a lot of people are worried about how removing gender from these categories may affect diversity. That is discussed in that video as well. Because, I mean, that is a valid concern. However, it's just a bit of a shame that the only outpouring of anger about this comes when we want to include non-binary people into this, seeing that every single other category is genderless. At the end of the day, this is just really sad. It's sad for Justin David Sullivan, who's had to speak up and out about this. It sucks for trans people who want to go into this industry. An industry that very often prides itself on its inclusivity. However, we end up with situations like this. As I said, when I made my last video, I knew that I would have to sit down and make a video like this. I knew that things weren't going to change, because I know this industry. But hopefully, change is on the horizon. If the Tony Awards are good on their word, next year we will have genderless categories. And hopefully we can find ways to make sure that we still strive by inclusivity for all within these. And that the Tony Awards make sure there is a diverse set of nominees. But at the end of the day, in this situation, my heart mostly goes out to Justin. Thank you so much for standing up for this, for making a stand, and for opening up this conversation. But what do you think? Obviously, I open up this discussion and I implore you to come to it with kindness and respect. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribing. It really helps me out, it helps out the channel. There's a link to some other videos on screen right now. But that's it for me today, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye.